Well, welcome back. It's been a week or two. So today we wanted to continue with, as promised, the Ecclesiastes perspective. I told you that I would do Solomon, and you probably thought I was going to land on Proverbs. There are tons of Proverbs that would speak well to getting through the eye of the needle. And one of the most prominent ones that is stated is God hates dishonest scales. So dishonest measurement, which is not thinking win-win. The idea here is more, not just, hey, I'm going to get what I can in the moment. That is a whole scripture that can be talked about issues of character, which is what this series attempts to address. But I just want to put that one out there that of all the Proverbs, if God hates dishonest scales and you are a believer in business, if you want to reflect the nature of Christ, you want to walk a righteous life, you want to share the gospel message to people, then it's what people don't normally see out in the open, what's in your heart, that's going to matter, right? So I want to help you as a wealthy person. I would like to encourage you to get through the eye of the needle. No problems, but it's got to take character adjustment. So we're going to move today into Ecclesiastes, which is a book that was widely considered to be authored by King Solomon, which, it's obvious in many parts, but there are some questions of whether it's another author, only because it takes a third person sort of perspective, the teacher, right? So he doesn't always say he may say something else. So anyway, I'm of the school that this is from King Solomon, and because I think he knows too much about what he's talking about. You know what I'm saying? So here's a little commentary I found on the author in my background study of Ecclesiastes that it's widely preached. It's a very depressing book. It's, he's gone and done everything, and what's left is meaningless. I think there's more to it than that. I think there's something of depth here that we need to kind of take a different perspective on. So let me just read to you what one commentator said about the author. With his life largely behind him, the author takes stock of the world as he has experienced it between the horizons of birth and death. The latter, a horizon beyond which man cannot see the world, is seen as being full of enigmas, the greatest of which is man himself. As the author looks about at the human experience, he sees man in mad pursuit of one thing then another, laboring as if he could master the world, lay bare its secrets, change its fundamental structures, break through the bounds of human limitations, and master his own destiny. He sees man vainly pursuing hopes and expectations that in reality are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. But faith teaches him that God has ordered all things according to his own purposes, that man's role is to accept these, including his own limitations, as God appoints. Man, therefore, should be patient and enjoy life as God gives it. He should know his own limitations and not vex himself with unrealistic expectations. He should be prudent in everything, living carefully before God and the King, and above all, fearing God and keeping his commandments. So what's the teaching here? I mean, when you read a comment like that, you now can kind of piece together why it would say in the New Testament, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world yet lose his own soul? Right here is a really good explanation of that, right? So the teaching is, as he states here, life not centered on God is purposeless and meaningless. Without him, nothing else can satisfy. With him, all of life and his other good gifts are to be gratefully received and used and enjoyed to the full. This book contains a philosophical and theological reflection of an old man, most of whose life is meaningless because he had not relied on God. Interesting stuff. I like the perspective because it also talks to me personally about the reverent respect of life experience. I don't take it for granted when somebody wants to speak life experience and sharing their story. It's really important to listen. It's really important to proactively listen and try to, uncover more and more layers of that story. Why? Not only is it going to edify myself, it's also going to be a place where that person can find peace, where they can express their life story, they can express their thoughts without fear of retribution or betrayal. We need this kind of fellowship, right? So, a couple of thoughts in the first couple chapters, and I'm not going to be exhaustive on this particular book. I want to point out a few key things because we're talking about a rich man reflecting. Remember, I did a short video on the depressed millionaire. It's easy to look at Ecclesiastes as, well, King Solomon, the richest king in history, and how he was depressed, how he did everything. But there's good explanation here, because even in modern times, people that chase after things and they chase after wealth and they don't know how to steward it well, they are just acquiring something to satisfy something else in their spirit. Okay, that usually what it boils down to is I can recall somebody who was a very strong professional person and whom I respected greatly. But she said she built their dream home. And once their dream home was built, she looked at it, and with her husband, they stood on the sidewalk and looked at this dream home that they finally were managed to build after years. And they said, now what? And people that are achievers, that are creators, that are innovators and all that, they're always looking for the next challenge. They're looking for the next height to climb. And when they can't find another challenge or a height to climb, they kind of go, what's the purpose of me being here? So I'm trying to lend some biblical support for people that find themselves in that spot. Because in the New Testament, I want to go to something a little bit more positive about getting through the eye of the needle. So here's a couple of thoughts about the scripture today that I want to bring out. First of all, every verse you could bring something out, but chapter 2, verse 1, the author writes, I thought in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure to find out what is good. But that also proved to be meaningless. Laughter, I said, is foolish. And what does pleasure accomplish? So here's somebody that denied himself nothing. And he comes to the very wise question, what's the point? Now that I have done it all, what was I thinking before I did it all? What was I thinking this all was going to add to me or make me a better person? Or, no, it's you have all the resources. Now you don't know what to do with it, right? One of the best leadership lessons I ever learned in my time walking with God and working with people was the difference between, now, I use this term, just to illustrate a point. But the difference between being a guru and a gardener. If you are a guru, which is a teacher, it could be explained in more depth, but the idea is that it's the main guy, the one guy that you want to go to, right? And the guru has so much knowledge, has so much wisdom, has so much, and that's your main focal point for personal growth, right? And a gardener is somebody that creates atmospheres of growth, right? They create the conditions for growth to happen. And what I look at here, I'm seeing a guy that is looking at all of these things and acquiring and doing all these things. He's looking at it from the point of view of a guru. Once I see the focal point of my growth, my questions, my answers and curiosities, then I'm going to go for that. But once I have reached that, the goal tends to kind of fade in the background in the rear view mirror of life. And then it's left you with a question. Well, what has it done for me? How has it improved my life experience? And now what? Right? So these finite things, these temporary things on this earth, they have their place, they have their use, when stewarded properly, like a gardener, right? It's a renewable resource of growth and benefit and wealth and happiness and prosperity. Or you take it like the guru, where it's the one focal point, and if you just reach that, then you've got everything. I think this is kind of what the author is kind of pointing at. This is just my interpretation, but take it for what it is. In chapter 2, verse 4, he says, point blank, I undertook great projects. So in chapter 1, he talks about, I decided to be a learner. I learned, I studied and explored, right? Whereas in chapter 2, he says, then I undertook great projects, and he went and he bought and sold slaves. He bought and sold property, built houses. It describes it in chapter 2. In verse 8, he says, I amassed silver and gold for myself and the treasure of kings and provinces. So not only did he set about with his own hands and his own resources to build, he also reaped from his region of authority. So there was nothing denied this person. And honestly, with great wealth or great power, Uncle Ben said with Spider-Man, he said, comes great responsibility. And some of us aren't really prepared for that kind of responsibility. And this is where this man finds himself. Verse 10, he says, I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. So he went everywhere, took on concubines and harems, and he did everything that is under the sun for a person to do, which qualifies him to be the kind of person that says, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Because after he had done it all, what now? Right? It's heaven or nowhere, right? So verse 21, he states, for a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not worked for it. This is where in my work we do family business succession. We have to train the next generation to be ready for it, right? And steward it well. But it is a very common notion that a man and his family may work hard to build wealth, then it levels off with the next generation, and then the third generation, it'll either go down or it levels off, and then his following generation actually doesn't steward it well, and then by the third generation it actually comes back, right? Because they've learned the lessons of abdication. They've learned the lessons of apathy and laziness, or being entitled, right? Anyway, so this is what he's saying. He says, this too is meaningless and a great misfortune. What does a man get for all his toil and anxious striving with which he labors under the sun? When you come to the end of your runway, what happens then? And this is a very real question for people that are very intelligent. They have stewarded their lives and resources well. They have amassed great wealth. But then how do we keep it in the family? This is where we have situations where we have oligarchs with old money, they call it. Old money is multi-generational, and there is an elite society in the world that is probably less than 2,000 people, right? And they have family ties everywhere. So that's another story. So the last thing I want to talk about here is his final conclusion in verse 24. And this is what I want you to take home with you today. I want you to put it in your heart. If you didn't get anything out of my discussion today, just think about this. Verse 24. What is the reward of all this wealth? What is the reward of all this experience? What is the reward here? Well, it boils down to something very simple. A man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, who can eat and find enjoyment? So there's a couple of other verses there that support that thought. I just wanted to register that one. To conclude this thought, a man can do nothing without God. And what is the value of everything we do if not for God, with God, and to provide resources for the wealth and prosperity of the world around us. If we do not improve it, then what's the point? Anyway, thank you for listening and watching today. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks everybody for watching today. We really appreciate your support. Please don't forget to like the video with a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel as it will help us get to that great 300 number we're targeting. As well, don't forget to hit the bell icon as it will remind you whenever a video comes out so you don't miss a thing. Thanks again for watching.